A 2,000-year-old harbor stands unbroken against the sea. Our own concrete fails in decades. This is the stunning reality of Roman concrete, a lost material science that humbles modern engineering. By the end of this, you will understand the chemical secrets that could rebuild our world for the ages. We will crack open ancient mortar to find reactive volcanic ash and a self-healing trick hidden in plain sight. How did a simple recipe create something we still cannot perfectly copy? What does their long vision reveal about our own rushed way of building? Is true durability a chemical formula or a forgotten way of thinking about time itself? Their secret began with a simple, almost humble observation. Roman engineers looked at the landscape around them and saw more than hills and beaches. They saw a solution. While we might see a volcano as a source of danger, they saw it as a source of strength. The bedrock of their empire was literally built from the ashes of its own fiery geology. This was the birth of opus cementitium, a material so transformative it deserves its own name, far beyond our simple word concrete. Think of it as the difference between baking a simple loaf of bread and crafting a sourdough with a centuries-old starter. One is functional, the other is alive with complexity. Roman concrete was the sourdough of the ancient building world. The innovation was staggering in its simplicity. Before Rome, major structures relied on precisely cut stone blocks, a slow and immensely labor-intensive process. It was like building a giant, heavy puzzle. But Roman engineers had a different idea. What if you could create a sort of artificial stone, one you could pour into any shape you desired? This was the genius of their concrete. They would build wooden frames, and into these molds they would pour a mixture of rubble, lime, and that magical volcanic ash. It would set not just hard, but into a monolithic mass stronger than the sum of its parts. Overnight, the very grammar of architecture changed. Curves, domes, and vast enclosed spaces became possible. The Pantheon's dome, still the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome, is not a feat of stacked stone. It is a single poured shell of this liquid rock. It freed architecture from the flat plane and the right angle. This was not a technology reserved for temples and palaces. It was democratized, spread across thousands of miles of empire. It flowed through aqueducts that brought fresh water to cities. It solidified into the roads that legions marched upon, and most tellingly, it was poured into the sea. The harbor at Caesarea Maritima is perhaps the ultimate testament. Imagine the audacity. You need a deep water port, but the coast is shallow. The modern solution involves steel sheet pilings, diesel-powered dredges, and massive cranes. The Roman solution: build a wooden formwork right in the Mediterranean waves and fill it with this special concrete. They created artificial breakwaters where nature provided none. These submerged blocks 2,000 years later are not just intact, they have grown stronger. While our modern ports battle constant erosion, the Roman harbor sits, a quiet rebuke to the passage of time. This was the skeleton of their civilization, a network of stone veins and sinews that held an empire together. But to see it as merely advanced mortar is to miss the point entirely. The real secret was not in building for their present, but for a future they would never see. The magic of their concrete was not just in the mixing, but in the very earth they walked upon. Our investigation begins with a peculiar, sandy ash found near the Italian town of Pozzolana. This unassuming material, which gave its name to the key ingredient pozzolana, was the first true component of their architectural alchemy. When Roman builders combined this volcanic ash with lime and water, they initiated a chemical reaction modern science is still working to fully understand. Think of it like this: modern concrete often uses sand and gravel as filler, materials that are essentially just there for bulk. They are inert, like adding pebbles to cement. But Pozzolana was different. It was a highly reactive aluminosilicate material, a mouthful that simply means it was packed with the right minerals to come alive in the presence of lime. Upon contact, it did not just sit there. It reacted, forming complex compounds with long scientific names, but the result was a gel. This gel was the true binder, a sticky, interlocking network that fused the entire mixture into a single, rock-like mass. This was Rome's not-so-secret weapon, a naturally occurring gift from the volcanoes that dotted their landscape. This reaction granted their concrete a property we call hydraulic, meaning it could set and harden even underwater. This was not a trivial feature. It was the cornerstone of their ambition. It meant they could build harbors directly in the sea, secure bridge piers in rushing rivers, and create aqueducts that never stopped carrying water. The discovery and systematic use of this volcanic gift was a stroke of geological luck, but it was the Roman mind that recognized its potential and turned that luck into the physical backbone of an empire. They did not just find a better building material, they found a way to make the landscape itself become architecture. Yet the Pozzolana alone was not enough. Every great reaction needs a catalyst, and for Roman concrete, that was lime. To create it, they heated limestone in massive kilns, a process that drove off carbon dioxide and left behind a highly reactive powder called quicklime. This material was so caustic it could burn skin on contact. The Romans would then carefully slake it with water, a volatile process that produced heat and steam, transforming it into a paste. This was the essential glue, the binder that would activate the volcanic ash. But here is where the story takes a fascinating turn. When scientists examined thin slices of ancient Roman concrete under modern microscopes, they expected to see a perfectly homogeneous mixture. Instead, they found something strange. Scattered throughout the dense matrix were tiny, white, angular fragments. For centuries, these little inclusions were written off as mistakes. They were seen as evidence of sloppy workmanship, bits of unreacted quicklime that simply had not mixed in properly. It was the architectural equivalent of finding eggshell in your cake batter, a sign of a rushed or careless cook. The modern engineering mind, trained to value purity and consistency, looked at these lime clasts and saw a flaw. We spent over a century trying to remove such imperfections from our own concrete, striving for a smooth, uniform blend. But what if our pursuit of perfection was actually the mistake? The latest research points to a startling possibility. These so-called flaws were not accidents at all. They may have been deliberately engineered. The Romans, it seems, understood something profound about the nature of time and stress. They knew that even the strongest material would eventually develop tiny cracks, especially in the brutal environment of a seawater harbor. Water would seep in, and without a repair mechanism, those small fractures would grow, leading to failure. Their ingenious solution was to build the repair mechanism directly into the material itself. Those little white lime clasts, scattered like dormant seeds throughout the concrete, were the secret. When a new crack forms and seawater finally infiltrates, it reacts with these pockets of pure quicklime. This triggers a new chemical reaction. The lime dissolves and then recrystallizes, effectively filling the crack from the inside out. It is a self-healing process, a built-in immune system for stone. The material does not just resist damage, it actively responds to it. This turns our entire understanding of durability on its head. We have long equated strength with uniformity, with having no weak points. The Roman approach suggests that true resilience might come from strategic heterogeneity, from embedding pockets of potential that activate only when needed. Their concrete was not designed to be flawless on day 1. It was designed to become stronger on day 1,000 or day 10,000, as the environment itself triggered its healing properties. This was not a haphazard recipe. It was a long-term strategy written in chemistry. Our own concrete tells a very different story, one of speed and sacrifice. The modern world runs on Portland cement, a material born from the furnaces of the Industrial Revolution. Its invention was a triumph of controlled chemistry, taking limestone and clay and blasting them with intense heat to create a fine, powerful powder. This process gives us a binder that sets fast and achieves remarkable strength in mere weeks, perfectly suited for the breakneck pace of contemporary construction. We pour skyscrapers and bridges on tight schedules, and this material delivers the numbers we need. But this incredible speed comes with a hidden long-term cost, a kind of built-in fragility. Think of it like a sprinter versus a marathon runner. Modern concrete is the sprinter, exploding off the line with power but not built for the endless miles. Its very chemistry makes it vulnerable. It can crack from its own internal heat as it cures. It erodes when exposed to road salts and seawater, and its greatest weakness often lies in the steel we put inside it for reinforcement. When that steel rusts, it expands, cracking the concrete from within in a process we spend billions to combat. We have engineered our civilization around a material with an expiration date, designing structures with planned lifespans of 50 or 100 years, knowing they will require constant, expensive care. This is the modern concrete conundrum. We build faster and taller than ever before, but we are locked in a perpetual cycle of repair and replacement. Against this backdrop, the Roman achievement shifts from a historical curiosity to a profound puzzle. They used a material that gained strength not in weeks, but over decades and centuries. Their harbors did not deteriorate in seawater, they were strengthened by it. This is the core of our mystery. How did an ancient recipe, seemingly simpler and slower, create something that outlasts our most advanced engineering? The answer forces us to question a fundamental assumption of our own time. Have we, in our pursuit of speed and immediate efficiency, forgotten how to build for the ages? The sea should be the ultimate enemy of any man-made structure. Salt water corrodes steel, freezes and expands in cracks, and carries a relentless chemical assault. Yet for Roman concrete, the open ocean was not a destroyer but a partner. This is the enduring enigma of seawater, a relationship that turns our basic understanding of material science on its head. Look at the submerged breakwaters of Portus Caucanus, a harbor built 2 millennia ago. While a modern concrete dock in the same location would be a crumbling, rebar-exposed skeleton within decades, these ancient blocks are not just surviving, they are thriving. They have become harder and more cohesive with each passing century. For decades, this was a profound mystery to researchers. How could a material not just resist, but actually benefit from an environment that is chemically hostile to everything we build today? The answer lies in a slow, beautiful chemical conversation. When seawater, rich with dissolved minerals, seeps into the microscopic pores and hairline cracks of the Roman concrete, it does not start a process of decay. Instead, it meets the reactive ingredients waiting inside, the lime and the volcanic ash. This meeting triggers a secondary reaction, one that unfolds over years and decades. The seawater reacts with these materials to grow new, rare minerals right inside the old cracks. Minerals with names like aluminous tobamorite and philipsite form as delicate, plate-like crystals. Think of it not as erosion, but as a form of geological knitting. Each tiny fissure becomes a site for new growth, as these crystals interlock and fill the space, creating a denser, more interwoven matrix than even the original pore. The concrete does not merely withstand the sea, it incorporates the sea into its own structure. The very agent of destruction for modern materials becomes the agent of repair and reinforcement for the Roman recipe. This is not a passive resistance, but an active, dynamic relationship with the environment. It suggests a philosophy of building that works with natural forces, not against them in a futile battle. The harbor does not fight the ocean, it has learned to speak its language. 2,000 years ago, an architect sat down to write a manual. His name was Marcus Vitruvius Pollio, and his 10-volume work on architecture was meant to be a complete guide for building the Roman world. Within its pages, he does something extraordinary. He gives us a recipe for the mortar used in harbor structures. He instructs builders to take 1 part of lime to 2 parts of the volcanic ash from Pozzolana, mixing it thoroughly with a specific type of sand. It is a moment of stunning clarity, a direct line from the ancient mind to our own. We have their cookbook written in their own hand, so why could we not simply follow it and recreate their magic? The answer lies in the nature of knowledge itself. Vitruvius was describing an art, a craft perfected through generations of observation and hands-on experience. He could tell you the ingredients and the rough proportions, but he had no concept of the atomic scale reactions that truly defined the material. He could not describe the formation of aluminous tobamorite crystals because such a concept did not exist. He wrote of the material's virtues, its ability to set underwater and endure, but the how was embedded in the practice, not the prose. This is the tantalizing gap between historical description and material performance. The text gives us the map, but the territory is one of chemistry and time that Vitruvius could never have seen. Think of it like a master chef's recipe passed down through generations. It might list flour, water, salt, and a sourdough starter, telling you to mix until it feels right and bake until done. But that feeling, that instinct for the right texture, the understanding of how ambient humidity affects the rise, the knowledge of how the long, slow fermentation develops flavor, that is the unwritten knowledge. You can have the list, but without the deep, tactile wisdom, you will not bake the same bread. Vitruvius gave us the ingredient list, the self-healing lime clasts, the strategic mixing of different-sized aggregates for optimal packing, the patience required for a slow, moist cure. These were the unwritten steps, the artisan's touch. His words are a crucial clue, a starting point that confirms we are looking in the right place, but they are not the final answer. The true mystery resides in that space between his instructions and the physical reality of a 2,000-year-old harbor block. To solve it, we must go beyond the text and into the material itself, using tools he could never have imagined to read a story written in stone. The assumption of a careless mistake held for over a century. Our modern standards of uniformity had blinded us. To see the truth, researchers had to look deeper, using tools that peer into the atomic structure of matter itself. They employed microdiffraction and spectroscopy, techniques that essentially allow us to ask the concrete a question and listen to its chemical answer. What they found within those little white specks was a revelation. These were not inert lumps of forgotten lime. They were precisely engineered reservoirs of pure, highly reactive calcium oxide, a material that sits waiting like a dormant chemical battery. The entire system was designed with a beautiful, patient logic. As the concrete ages and inevitable microscopic cracks begin to form, they creep through the material. The moment one of these hairline fractures intersects a lime clast, the environment changes. Water, perhaps from sea spray or rain, seeps into the crack and makes contact with this reactive core. A silent, automatic process begins. The water dissolves the calcium oxide, creating a solution rich with calcium ions. This saturated fluid then flows back into the very crack that allowed it entry. There, exposed to the air, it undergoes a second transformation. It recrystallizes, forming a new mineral, calcium carbonate. This is the same substance as natural limestone, a fundamental building block of the earth itself. The crack is not just patched, it is literally filled with new rock, seamlessly bonded to the old. The repair is perfect, local, and requires no human intervention. It is a self-healing mechanism written into the fabric of the material. This discovery reframes everything. What we dismissed as a flaw was, in fact, the masterstroke. The Romans did not achieve perfection by eliminating imperfections. They achieved longevity by strategically placing them. Their concrete was not a static, finished product the day it hardened. It was a dynamic system, a living material programmed to respond to injury. While we build structures that fight a losing battle against decay, they built structures that could heal their own wounds. This single insight shifts the goal from building something that resists time to building something that evolves with it. But a brilliant chemical recipe is useless without a masterful hand to apply it. The Romans understood this deeply. Their genius extended far beyond the mortar mix itself into the very art of its placement. Evidence from ancient harbors suggests they employed a technique that was both simple and profoundly effective, a method of layering and tamping. Imagine the scene on a Mediterranean shore 2,000 years ago. Workers would construct massive wooden forms right in the tidal zone, and into these open-topped boxes, they would begin pouring their volcanic concrete mixture. But they did not just dump it in and walk away. They likely used long poles or heavy tools to vigorously tamp down each layer as it was placed. This was not random pounding. It served a critical purpose: to drive out large air bubbles and to force the wet mortar into every crevice between the coarse aggregates, the fist-sized rocks and rubble that formed the bulk of the mass. This compaction created an intensely intimate contact between the seawater already present and the reactive mortar. It was like pressing two pieces of clay together so firmly that they become one, ensuring the chemical conversation with the sea began immediately and thoroughly. The result was a material that was intentionally, strategically heterogeneous. Modern engineers often strive for a uniform, smooth consistency, like a perfectly blended cake batter. Roman concrete was more like a rich, chunky stew, with ingredients of wildly different sizes suspended within it. This mix of large rocks, smaller gravel, and the fine mortar binder created a complex network of pores and pathways throughout the entire block. To our modern eyes, this might look messy, even flawed, but this very messiness was its hidden strength. That wide distribution of pore sizes allowed for a controlled movement of fluids. Seawater could seep in slowly along 1,000,000 tiny channels, reaching deep into the heart of the material to activate the lime clasts and the pozzolanic ash. It created an immense internal surface area, a vast reactive landscape where those long-term healing crystals could grow. The concrete was not a solid, impermeable barrier. It was more like a porous, living sponge, designed to interact with its environment on a microscopic scale. This deliberate heterogeneity meant every cubic inch of the harbor wall was an active participant in its own preservation. The large stones provided brute strength and mass, the mortar provided the reactive glue, and the network of pores provided the transportation system for the healing chemistry. It was a holistic system where the mixing, the placement, and the material science were all parts of a single, enduring philosophy. They were not just building a wall, they were cultivating a stone. Standing beneath the Pantheon's dome is to feel history press down upon you. Its vast, coffered ceiling floats 142 feet overhead, a perfect hemisphere of ancient concrete that has defied gravity and time for nearly 1,900 years. It is not a dome of stone blocks, but a single, poured shell, and it remains the largest unreinforced concrete dome on Earth. This is not a relic preserved in a museum case. It is a living, functioning space that has outlasted empires, witnessed countless generations, and survived earthquakes that have toppled lesser structures. Its endurance is a silent, daily rebuke to our modern assumptions about what building materials can do. Consider a modern concrete dome of similar ambition, constructed in the 20th century. To achieve that same breathtaking span, our engineers would lace the concrete with a dense skeleton of steel rebar. This reinforcement provides the necessary tensile strength, the ability to resist pulling forces that plain concrete lacks. It is our technological solution, and it works, allowing us to build wonders of our own. But this solution contains the seed of its own decay. That steel, hidden within the stone, is vulnerable. Moisture inevitably finds its way in through microscopic cracks. When it reaches the steel, it triggers corrosion. Rust expands with a force powerful enough to split concrete from the inside out. The very thing that gives the dome its strength becomes its greatest point of failure. A structure like this enters a countdown from the day it is completed, destined for expensive, invasive repairs within a century, a cycle of maintenance that never truly ends. The Pantheon knows no such cycle. It has never been reinforced, and it has never needed to be. Its secret lies in the intelligence of its recipe, a sophistication we are only now learning to measure. The Romans did not use a single, uniform mix throughout the massive structure. They graded the material with breathtaking precision. The heavy foundations used dense, basaltic rock. As the walls rise, the aggregate becomes lighter, shifting to brick and tufa. And for the soaring dome itself, they used pumice, a volcanic stone so full of air pockets it can float on water. This was not a random choice. It was a deliberate strategy to reduce the dead weight at the highest, most critical point, minimizing the downward and outward thrust on the supporting walls. They engineered the dome not just as a shape, but as a gradient of mass and strength. Furthermore, the famous coffers, those recessed square panels that pattern the interior, are not merely decorative. They serve a brilliant structural purpose, thinning the concrete at precisely calculated points to remove excess material without sacrificing integrity, much like the ribs in a leaf or the bones of a bird. Every element, from the mix to the form, was optimized. Its survival through seismic shifts and 2 millennia of environmental stress is not a miraculous accident. It is the direct result of a material science that thought in centuries, a concrete that could carry its own weight and heal its own wounds. We look up at that ancient ceiling and see a finished monument. But science is beginning to see something else entirely, a dynamic system that is still, in many ways, alive. This chemical legacy carries a heavy, modern price tag. The material that built our world is also quietly warming it. The production of Portland cement, the universal glue of modern construction, is a staggering source of global carbon dioxide emissions, responsible for roughly 8% of the total released by human activity each year. To understand that scale, picture every car, truck, plane, and ship on the planet. The cement industry's footprint rivals that of all global road transport. The problem is baked into the very chemistry of its creation. Making cement demands an incredible furnace. Limestone, which is mostly calcium carbonate, must be heated to around 1,450 degrees Celsius. The fuels burned to achieve that searing heat release vast amounts of carbon dioxide. But the material itself also releases gas in a fundamental chemical divorce. The intense heat breaks the limestone apart, driving off carbon dioxide and leaving behind lime. So for every ton of cement produced, nearly a ton of carbon dioxide can enter the atmosphere, a double burden of combustion and chemistry. We are literally baking our atmosphere to build our cities. Now contrast this with the Roman thermal recipe. Their lime was calcined at a much lower temperature, closer to 900 degrees Celsius, a significant energy saving. More importantly, their concrete was not mostly cement. It was mostly rock and volcanic ash, materials that required no kiln, no processing, just the labor of gathering. The pozzolana was not manufactured, it was simply collected. This drastically altered the environmental equation. The Roman formula traded intensive, high-heat industry for the intelligent use of a natural, reactive resource. The implications for our own time are profound and urgent. What if the secret to a more durable built environment is also the secret to a lighter footprint on the planet? This is no longer just a historical puzzle. It is a pressing ecological imperative. Researchers are now asking if we can adapt this ancient wisdom using modern industrial byproducts like fly ash from coal plants or slag from steel production to mimic the reactive role of volcanic ash. The goal is a new generation of concrete that requires less Portland cement, cures at lower temperatures, and still possesses that legendary durability. The dream is a material that builds not for decades but for centuries while emitting a fraction of the carbon. It is the pursuit of a double victory, marrying the longevity of the past with the sustainability needs of our future. The quiet harbor blocks in the Mediterranean Sea are no longer just relics. They have become a blueprint. The quiet proof of those ancient harbors has ignited a modern quest. Across laboratories and research facilities, teams of scientists and material engineers are now attempting to reverse engineer the Roman recipe, not as a historical exercise, but as a blueprint for our own future. This is not about imitation, it is about translation, taking an ancient principle and adapting it for a 21st century world. The goal is audacious: to create a new class of concrete that carries the self-healing, long-lived soul of the old, but can be produced with modern materials and methods. The first step is finding a substitute for that magical volcanic ash. Today, we do not mine Pozzolana, but we produce mountains of an industrial byproduct with surprisingly similar properties: fly ash. This fine powder, a residue from coal-fired power plants, is rich in the same silicates and aluminates that made the Roman mix so reactive. By blending this with lime and other additives, researchers have created laboratory samples that, when cracked and exposed to water, show a clear ability to seal themselves. They have even engineered synthetic versions of those crucial lime clasts, carefully distributing them through the mix to act as the repair reservoirs. In controlled tests, these modern analogues do indeed heal. A hairline fracture in a small block placed in a tank of simulated seawater can become filled with new crystalline growth in a matter of weeks. The chemical principle works. We can see the ancient magic spark to life under a microscope. Yet, a successful lab experiment is a world away from pouring a foundation or a seawall. The translation from Petri dish to port reveals the true scale of the challenge. The first, and perhaps most fundamental conflict, is with time itself. Roman concrete was not in a hurry. It gained strength slowly over years and even decades as those long-term chemical conversations unfolded within its matrix. In an era where a major construction project is measured on a schedule of months, not centuries, a material that takes years to reach its full potential is simply not feasible. Our entire economic and logistical system is built on speed. We pour a bridge deck and need it to carry traffic in a matter of weeks. This creates a profound mismatch between the ancient material's natural rhythm and the relentless tempo of modern development. The second hurdle is one of artistry at an industrial scale. In the lab, a researcher can meticulously control every variable, creating a perfect, small sample with the ideal distribution of aggregates and lime clasts. But how do you replicate that intricate, multi-scale heterogeneity in a rotating cement truck mixing 5 cubic yards at a time, or in a continuous production line pouring miles of highway? The Roman method relied on tamping and layering in place, a hands-on, almost craft-based approach. Reproducing that same internal microstructure, that perfect gradient of stone and reactive paste with giant automated machinery, is a monumental engineering puzzle. It is the difference between a master chef preparing a single, exquisite dish and a factory producing 10,000 identical frozen meals. The flavor principle might be the same, but the execution is entirely different. We have, in a sense, decoded the list of ingredients from Vitruvius's scroll. We understand the chemical reactions described in modern scientific papers. But the unwritten knowledge, the artisan's intuition for the mix, the placement, and the patient cure, that embodied wisdom, is far harder to resurrect. The current frontier is not just about copying a material, it is about redesigning an entire process, one that must satisfy the uncompromising demands of durability, sustainability, and speed. The ancient builders left us a finished symphony in stone. We are still learning how to conduct the orchestra. The real missing ingredient was not a mineral, but a mindset. Roman engineers designed with time as a core parameter. Their concrete was not a finished product the day it hardened, it was a beginning. It was engineered to mature, to adapt, to enter into a slow, strengthening dialogue with the world around it. This required a vision that stretched far beyond a single human lifetime, an acceptance that the greatest strength would come not immediately, but in a future they would never see. They built for legacy in the most literal sense, constructing a world meant to endure for their grandchildren's grandchildren. This long-term vision stands in stark contrast to the economic engines that drive modern construction, which prioritize rapid assembly, immediate utility, and fast return on investment. Our systems are optimized for the short cycle, for building something that is good enough to last through a mortgage or a depreciation schedule. The Roman formula operated on a different clock entirely. It understood implicitly that true durability is not a static property you achieve and then lock in place. It is a dynamic, ongoing process. It is the story of a material learning to live within its environment, to be shaped by wind and water not into ruin but into greater cohesion. By creating a concrete that interacted beneficially with seawater, that used cracks as an opportunity for self-repair, they engineered resilience on a timescale we have largely forgotten. This is perhaps the most humbling lesson waiting for us in those ancient harbor walls. We can analyze the Pozzolana and map the lime clasts, but reclaiming this patient, strategic perspective may be the true key. It asks a profound question of our own era. Can we learn to value the slow strength of a century as highly as we value the quick profit of a quarter? The chemical recipe can be reverse engineered, but the temporal one, the willingness to build for a future we will not own, that is a far more difficult formula to rediscover. Their mastery was built upon a foundation of pure geological luck. The Roman heartland sat directly atop one of the most volcanically active regions in Europe, a landscape constantly remade by fire. The fertile plains and rolling hills of central Italy were, in fact, the gift of ancient eruptions, layers of ash and rock that would become the literal bedrock of an empire. The Bay of Naples was not just a scenic harbor, it was a vast, open-air quarry for the most crucial ingredient they possessed. The Pozzolana mine, there was not a uniform substance, but a spectrum of volcanic materials, each with slightly different reactive properties, giving builders a versatile palette to work with. This local abundance was a strategic advantage of immense scale, comparable to a nation today discovering it, sits atop the world's largest reserve of a critical industrial mineral. It allowed for standardization on a grand scale. An engineer in Rome, a planner in Austria, and a legion commander in Gaul could all work from the same fundamental material understanding, because the same volcanic sand was shipped along the same maritime highways that carried troops and grain. This created a unified architectural language, a consistency of strength that bound the physical empire together. But empires do not stay within their lucky geological borders. As Rome expanded, pushing into regions devoid of Italian volcanoes, their engineers faced a new challenge. They could not transport millions of tons of heavy sand across thousands of miles of land. The solution was a testament to their empirical brilliance. They learned to identify local substitutes. In Germany, they used trass, a volcanic tuff. In the eastern provinces, they sought out ashes from Turkish volcanoes. Even in North Africa, far from any dramatic peaks, they found and used certain reactive sediments. This global scavenger hunt for the right kind of dirt tells us something profound. While they had no knowledge of alumina silicates or calcium silicate hydrates, they possessed a deep, practical wisdom. They knew the material had to be fine, glassy, and would react with lime to get hot and set hard. They developed functional tests, likely mixing small samples to observe the reaction, a form of quality control conducted 2,000 years before the modern chemistry lab. Their knowledge was embedded in practice, not theory. This raises a haunting counterfactual. What if Rome had risen not in Italy, but in a geologically stable region like ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, lands of clay and limestone but no volcanoes? Would their architectural revolution have ever occurred? Could they have developed the same enduring concrete without the accidental catalyst lying at their feet? Their technological zenith was, in a very real sense, a partnership with their specific place on Earth. The formula was both a stroke of genius and a product of serendipity, a dialogue between human ambition and the unique chemistry of their home ground. This intertwining of fortune and skill forces us to wonder how many other great innovations in history were not just acts of will, but also gifts of geography, waiting for the right mind to recognize a humble material's hidden potential. The great concrete harbors and soaring domes did not vanish with a crash, but with a long, slow silence. As the political unity of the Western Roman Empire fragmented, so too did the intricate network that sustained its technological heights. The systematic knowledge of concrete was not stored in a single library that could be burned, but in a living tradition of master builders, quarry managers, and supply chains that stretched across the Mediterranean. When that vast, interconnected system unraveled, the expertise it carried began to dissipate like smoke. The large-scale infrastructure projects that demanded such high-quality hydraulic concrete, the aqueducts, the imperial harbors, the vast public baths, were no longer a priority for the new kingdoms that emerged. Their economic and political worlds had contracted, focused on local stability and defense, not on monumental civic works that served a distant emperor. The architectural language itself shifted, turning toward the more immediately accessible materials of stone and brick, which could be worked by local craftsmen without the need for a deep, chemical understanding of poured mortar. The precise recipes and the sophisticated placement techniques, the tamping and the graded aggregates, did not disappear in a single moment. They faded, becoming reduced to localized, lesser practices, used for simple foundations or rubble fill, their true potential forgotten. The great concrete structures remained, standing in plain sight, but the understanding of how to recreate them did not. This was not a loss due to a cataclysm, but to a slow erosion. Institutional knowledge is a fragile thing. It requires continuity, apprenticeship, and a society that values and funds the complex application of that knowledge. When those conditions change, the technology can slip away, even while its greatest achievements still loom over the landscape. For over a millennium, the concrete secrets became ghosts in the ruins. People in the Middle Ages looked upon the Pantheon or the massive substructures of Roman bridges with awe, often attributing them to giants or divine intervention. They saw the enduring stone, but the chemical wisdom that created it was silent, its whispers unheard. This historical amnesia is a profound cautionary tale. It reminds us that complex technological knowledge is not a permanent possession. It is a flame that must be actively tended, passed from hand to hand and mind to mind across generations. A society can walk amidst the artifacts of a superior technology, yet be utterly incapable of reproducing it, simply because the living chain of understanding has been broken. The silence of those centuries between the Roman world and the Renaissance stands as a testament to how easily the deepest layers of practical genius can be lost, not to invasion, but to neglect and the turning of a culture's attention inward. We can now listen to the story the stone itself has been telling. This investigation is powered by a suite of technologies that would seem like pure magic to a Roman engineer. tools that allow us to see not just the surface of their concrete, but deep into its atomic soul. The scanning electron microscope is our first window, capable of magnifying a speck of mortar over 100,000 times. Through its lens, the dense gray mass dissolves into a breathtaking landscape. We see the delicate, interlocking plates of tobermorite crystals, the very minerals that grew over centuries to knit the material together. It is a miniature world of geometric perfection, a crystal garden cultivated by time and seawater. This is not a static picture, it is a snapshot of an ongoing process, revealing the concrete as a dynamic, almost living matrix. To identify these crystals with certainty, we turn to X-ray diffraction. This technique is like asking the material to sing its own chemical signature. By bombarding a sample with X-rays and analyzing how they scatter, scientists can identify every crystalline phase present, distinguishing between the original volcanic ash, the binding gels, and the rare, long-term growths like philipsite. It confirms that what we are seeing is not a modern contaminant, but the authentic, aged heart of the Roman recipe. But the most powerful tool in our arsenal may be the synchrotron. These massive particle accelerators generate beams of light billions of times brighter than the sun, focused down to a pinpoint. Using synchrotron radiation, researchers can perform micro-scale chemical mapping. They can trace, atom by atom, the migration of calcium from those once maligned lime clasts, following its path as it dissolved into a crack and recrystallized as a healing scar of new stone. We can watch the repair mechanism in action, frozen in time at a scale 1,000 times smaller than the width of a human hair. These instruments transform a silent block of ancient harbor concrete into something profound, a dynamic historical archive. Every crystal, every mineral intergrowth, every subtle gradient in composition is a recorded entry. This material has been meticulously documenting its own life story for 2,000 years, a continuous log of environmental interaction, stress, and self-repair. We are no longer just analyzing a building material. We are reading a 2,000-year-old diary, one written not in ink or parchment, but in the silent, steadfast language of atoms and molecular bonds. The sea was not their only canvas. While the self-healing marine concrete captures our imagination, Roman builders were masterful pragmatists, tailoring their recipes to the task at hand with a versatility that defies the idea of a single lost secret. On solid ground, a different kind of strength was required. For the immense foundations of temples, amphitheaters, and city walls, they relied on a robust, economical mix. Here, the star ingredient was often simple rubble, what they called cimenta. These were broken stones, bricks, and even recycled ceramic fragments, bound together with a mortar of lime and local sand. This was not a magical, reactive volcanic blend, but a workhorse material designed for immense compressive strength to bear the colossal weight of everything built above it. Think of it as the difference between a specialized diving suit and a sturdy pair of work boots. Each is engineered for a completely different environment, yet both are essential to the overall endeavor. This terrestrial concrete formed the unseen, unyielding platform upon which their visible grandeur stood. It was a testament to their practical wisdom, using what was locally abundant and fit for purpose. Nowhere is this layered, strategic thinking more evident than beneath your feet, or more precisely, beneath the original paving stones of a Roman road. The famous via were not simple paths. They were complex, multi-layered engineering projects designed to last for centuries of military and commercial traffic. The process began with digging a deep trench. At the very bottom, a layer of large stones was carefully placed for drainage. Upon this, they would often pour a thick stratum of this rubble-based concrete, the cementitium, creating a stable, unified platform that would not settle or shift. On top of this concrete base, layers of graded gravel, sand, and finally, the large, interlocking stone slabs were added. The concrete was the hidden anchor, the silent guarantor of the road's legendary straightness and durability. It prevented the upper layers from mixing with the soft earth below, ensuring the surface remained intact through floods and frosts. In some regions, they discovered even more localized solutions. In parts of what is now Germany and France, they encountered natural deposits of clay that, when mixed with lime, produced a rudimentary natural cement. They used it. In areas with poor local stone, they increased the proportion of crushed brick and tile in the mix, a material we now know adds beneficial pozzolanic properties of its own. This was not a one-size-fits-all empire. It was an empire of adaptable, on-the-ground problem solvers. What unified these diverse recipes was not a fixed list of ingredients, but a deep, intuitive understanding of composite materials. They viewed concrete not as a singular substance, but as a system, a marriage of binder and aggregate. They knew the binder, the lime mortar, provided the glue. They knew the aggregate, whether volcanic ash, sand, or rubble, provided the bulk and the internal structure. Their genius lay in knowing how to adjust that marriage for different conditions. Need a harbor wall? Use the reactive ash and encourage seawater infiltration. Need a road base? Use dense local rubble and a strong lime mortar for pure load-bearing capacity. This reveals a holistic engineering philosophy far more advanced than we once credited. They were not just following a recipe, they were reading the landscape, assessing local resources, and then designing a material to meet the specific mechanical and environmental demands of the project. The true lost formula, then, may not be a chemical one etched on a scroll. It may be this broader, more flexible mindset, a way of thinking about materials as dynamic partners in a conversation with function, geography, and time. Behind every perfect mixture lay a colossal, humming machine of empire. The secret to Roman concrete was not just in the chemistry, but in the monumental logistics that delivered the right ingredients to the right place at the right time. This was a feat of organization on a scale that rivaled the engineering itself. Consider the journey of a single ingredient, the volcanic pozzolana. It began in the hills around the Bay of Naples, where quarries operated on an industrial scale. This fine, reactive sand was then loaded by the ton onto sturdy merchant ships. These vessels became floating supply lines, navigating established sea routes to deliver their crucial cargo to distant construction sites, from the harbors of North Africa to the bridge projects in Gaul. The material was useless if it could not reach the builder's trowel, and Rome's mastery of Mediterranean trade routes made this planetary supply chain a daily reality. Simultaneously, another critical operation was underway inland. Near sources of high-quality limestone, smoke would rise from the mouths of lime kilns. These were not small backyard operations. They were often substantial facilities, positioned strategically to minimize the transport of the heavy raw stone. Workers would feed limestone chunks into these kilns, maintaining the intense, sustained heat needed to transform rock into reactive quicklime. This material, once cooled, was also packaged and shipped, often along rivers or roads, to meet the pozzolana at the construction site. This coordination of mining, processing, and shipping across thousands of miles was a silent triumph of administration. It required maps, schedules, contracts, and a deep understanding of seasonal winds and road conditions. The entire endeavor was held together by the economic and political stability of the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, which ensured safe passage and predictable trade. This system did not run itself. It was orchestrated by a professional class of engineers and logisticians. The Roman military, particularly its corps of engineers, played an instrumental role. These architecti were not just battlefield engineers. They were the empire's master builders, trained in standardized techniques and dispatched to oversee major infrastructure projects from Britain to Syria. Wherever the legions went, they built, and they built to a consistent, durable standard. This military backbone provided a ready-made network of skilled labor and organizational rigor that could be applied to civilian projects, ensuring that a harbor in Judea used techniques and material specifications similar to a harbor in Hispania. The recipe for concrete, therefore, was embedded within a much larger recipe for imperial management. The knowledge was not merely written down, it was enacted day after day by quartermasters, ship captains, kiln operators, and legionary engineers. This context changes our understanding of the loss. When the Western Roman Empire fragmented, it was not a single library that burned. It was this entire integrated system that slowly ground to a halt. The safe trade routes became dangerous. The centralized funding for massive public works dried up. The professional engineering corps disbanded or turned its focus solely to local defense. The intricate dance between quarry, kiln, ship, and site fell out of rhythm. The chemical formula did not vanish from human memory overnight. The vast, expensive, and organized economy that made its widespread application possible simply ceased to exist. The knowledge became stranded, like a sophisticated appliance in a home that has lost its electrical grid. This is why rediscovering the formula today is about more than laboratory chemistry. It forces us to ask a modern question. Can we recreate not just the ancient material, but the ancient efficiency? Can we build sustainable, long-lasting infrastructure without the backing of a single, all-powerful state to coordinate its production? Our challenge is to adapt that Roman scale of thinking to a globalized yet fragmented world. We must design supply chains for durability, creating markets not just for the cheapest concrete, but for the concrete that heals itself and lasts for centuries. The true lesson from the ruins may be that the most enduring materials are always supported by the most resilient systems. But to call it a perfect supermaterial is to build another myth upon the ruins. The truth is more grounded and in many ways more instructive. Not every Roman concrete structure stands pristine. We find examples that have crumbled, especially in less than ideal conditions, or when local substitutes for the volcanic ash were not quite as reactive. The material had a very specific, brilliant strength, but also a clear limitation. Its tensile strength, its ability to resist being pulled apart, was quite low. This is why you never see a Roman concrete beam spanning a great distance on its own. They understood this intimately, and they designed with that limitation in mind. They used their concrete almost exclusively in compression, in shapes that channeled weight downward, where its ability to withstand crushing forces was unmatched. The arch, the vault, the dome, these are all compression shapes. The weight of the structure pushes inward and downward, and the concrete answers with pure monolithic resistance. To protect surfaces and add further stability, they often faced their concrete with bricks or stone, a beautiful marriage of materials where each played to its strength. They did not have our invention of steel-reinforced concrete, which gives modern structures their ability to resist bending and tension, allowing for the slender skyscrapers and cantilevered bridges of our age. This is the crucial distinction. The Roman advantage was not raw, universal strength. It was targeted, intelligent longevity. It was a material engineered to be exceptionally durable and self-maintaining within its very specific design parameters. It was built for the marathon of time, not the sprint of maximum load. This nuance changes our entire mission today. We are not seeking a magic bullet to replace all modern concrete. That would be impossible and unnecessary. Our skyscrapers and bridges rely on the tensile magic of steel reinforcement, a technology the Romans never possessed. Instead, the real goal is integration. We are looking to weave that ancient wisdom of durability into our modern toolkit for specific, critical applications where longevity is the paramount concern. Imagine a seawall protecting a coastal city. built with a modern, self-healing concrete that grows stronger with each passing storm surge. Consider the containment structures for long-term nuclear storage, where material integrity must be guaranteed not for decades but for millennia. Think of preserving our own monuments for future generations, using a concrete that can seal its own micro-cracks against pollution and frost. In these arenas, the Roman philosophy is not a historical footnote, it is a vital design imperative. We can admire their arches while still building our steel-framed towers. The future may not lie in choosing one over the other, but in learning when to use the sprint and when to prepare for the endless marathon. These possibilities are not science fiction, but a direct inheritance from the harbor at Caesarea. The self-healing chemistry we have been decoding could redefine our relationship with the sea. Picture the colossal concrete foundations of an offshore wind farm, submerged in the punishing North Atlantic. Today, these structures face a constant, expensive battle against saltwater corrosion, requiring protective coatings and complex cathodic protection systems. A concrete imbued with the Roman principle would approach the same environment as a partner. Instead of fighting a losing war against infiltration, it would use the seawater's own minerals to seal microcracks, potentially extending the service life of such critical green energy infrastructure from decades to centuries. The economic and environmental implications are staggering, reducing the need for disruptive repairs and the constant consumption of new materials. This same logic applies to the very bones of our coastal cities, the sea walls and piers that protect billions of dollars in property and countless lives. A breakwater built with this in mind would not be a static barrier slowly eroding, but a dynamic structure growing more integrated with its marine environment year after year. The need for endurance reaches its ultimate expression in the challenge of containing radioactive waste, material that must be isolated from the biosphere for time spans that dwarf recorded human history. Our current solutions rely on multiple, redundant barriers, but the primary one is often concrete. For such a task, a material that merely resists decay for a few hundred years is insufficient. We need a material that can actively maintain its integrity, that can heal the tiny fractures induced by temperature shifts or minor seismic activity over millennia. The Roman formula, with its long-term mineral growth and self-sealing properties, offers a compelling philosophical blueprint. While the specific chemistry would need adaptation for this unique environment, the core concept is precisely what is required, a built-in automatic response to the passage of epochs. It shifts the goal from building a perfect, static tomb to creating a living capsule that can care for itself across generations we cannot even envision. Closer to the spirit of the original builders, this rediscovered knowledge could complete a profound circle. Conservators and archaeologists face a constant dilemma when repairing ancient structures, including Roman ruins themselves. Modern cement-based mortars are often too hard and impermeable, trapping moisture and salts against the original stone, causing further damage. A mortar truly based on the ancient principles, using reactive volcanic materials or their modern equivalents, would be chemically and mechanically compatible. It would allow historic buildings to breathe and heal in a way that respects their original design, preserving them not as frozen museum pieces, but as continuing testaments to their own enduring logic. Perhaps the most elegant modern twist lies in the materials themselves. The Roman builders used a natural byproduct of volcanoes. We create mountains of our own industrial byproducts, like fly ash from coal plants and slag from steel mills. These materials share the crucial alumina-silicate chemistry that made Pozzolana so reactive. Instead of treating this ash as waste, we can see it as a resource, a modern pozzolan waiting to be activated. This creates a powerful circular economy model inspired by antiquity. We could take the residue of one industry and transform it into the durable heart of another, building roads, bridges, and harbors that lock away industrial waste in a stable, useful form for centuries. This approach does more than just solve a disposal problem. It dramatically lowers the carbon footprint of new concrete by replacing a large portion of the carbon-intensive Portland cement. The ancient recipe thus points toward a future where resilience and sustainability are not added features, but foundational qualities, built into the very fabric of our world from the molecular level up. It suggests that the legacy of Roman concrete is not just about rebuilding what was lost, but about reimagining what we can build next. Their formula was never a single page in a patent office. This is the subtle heart of the mystery. We search for a lost recipe, but the Romans may never have possessed one in the way we understand it today. Their mastery was a living ecosystem of knowledge, distributed across three distinct but interconnected realms. First, there were the written guidelines like those of Vitruvius, which gave the broad strokes, the ingredient lists, and general proportions. Think of this as the official sheet music for a symphony. It tells you which instruments play and the basic melody. Second, and far more vital, was the deep well of oral tradition, passed from master builders to apprentices within close-knit guilds. This was the unwritten art, the conductor's interpretation, the subtle emphasis on a certain note, the precise feel of the mortar at the perfect consistency, the instinct for how long to tamp a layer in a specific humidity. It was knowledge stored in gesture, in story, and in the muscle memory of countless hands. Finally, there was the relentless engine of empirical experience. Roman engineers were obsessive observers and improvisers. They built, they watched, they learned. If a harbor wall in one province cracked while another thrived, they would analyze the local sand, the water, the mix. Success and failure were their most rigorous textbooks. This triad of knowledge created a resilient system, but its strength was also its fragility. It was what modern scholars call tacit knowledge. Know how that is embedded in practice and culture, not written in theory. You cannot fully capture it in a manual. It is the difference between reading a book on how to ride a bicycle and actually feeling the balance beneath you. The Roman concrete tradition was that feeling, honed over generations. It thrived within the stable, interconnected culture of the empire, where apprenticeships were long, projects were vast, and masters could pass their craft to the next generation on the job site. When that cultural continuity shattered, the knowledge did not vanish in a library fire. It evaporated like morning mist. The guilds dispersed, the great projects ceased. The master builders, with their lifetimes of tactile wisdom, found no new apprentices to teach. The written guidelines of Vitruvius survived, but they were like a skeleton without muscle or breath, a ghost of the full living practice. This reframes our entire modern quest. We are not archaeologists searching for a missing scroll. We are detectives trying to reverse engineer a feeling, a craft, an intuition from its physical remains. Our challenge is to take the tacit knowledge we infer from the silent testimony of the Pantheon's dome or a harbor block and painstakingly convert it back into explicit, reproducible science. We must translate the artisan's touch into laboratory protocols, the builder's instinct into engineering specifications. It is an attempt to give voice to a wisdom that once spoke only through the work of hands and the patience of stone. Even the most brilliant material must pass through the gauntlet of modern law and expectation. For a concrete inspired by ancient wisdom to rebuild our cities, it must first be approved by them, navigating a labyrinth of building codes and standards written for a completely different world. These regulations are the rulebook of our civilization, meticulously crafted around the known, predictable behavior of Portland cement. Every specification, from the required strength after 28 days to the precise way it bonds with steel rebar, is a love letter to the material that built the 20th century. A new formula, one that gains strength over years rather than weeks, that might have lower early strength, and whose long-term dance with reinforcement steel is still being mapped, exists outside this rulebook. It is a language the current system does not yet understand. Before a single foundation could be poured, this new old concrete would need to prove itself in a battery of accelerated tests, simulating decades of stress and weather in a matter of months, all to satisfy committees of engineers trained in the old ways. This is not merely a scientific hurdle, it is a profound systemic shift. It demands new textbooks for university classrooms, new chapters in professional licensing exams, and a fundamental update to the very vocabulary of construction law. The challenge reveals a deeper truth about technological adoption. Reviving an ancient idea is not just about perfecting a mix in a lab. It is about convincing an entire ecosystem of builders, insurers, architects, and officials to trust a different rhythm of strength. The material must earn a place not only in the ground but in the code. The Roman harbors are not the only ancient structures whispering secrets of longevity. Across the globe, in the shadow of the Great Wall and deep within Mayan cities, archaeologists and materials scientists are uncovering a parallel story. This is a global search for analogues, a quest to see if other cultures, completely disconnected from Rome, stumbled upon similar principles of enduring construction. It turns out the Romans were not alone in their material genius. Take the mortar-binding sections of China's Great Wall, a structure that has defied centuries of warfare and weather. Analysis reveals a surprising ingredient: sticky rice soup. This organic addition, mixed with slaked lime, created a composite material that is remarkably resilient. The amylopectin in the rice acted as a natural polymer, inhibiting the growth of damaging crystals and forming a dense, waterproof matrix that resists erosion far better than plain lime mortar. It was an ancient recipe for an organic-inorganic composite, a marriage of farm and quarry that yielded a bond of legendary strength. Far across the world, the Maya developed their own sophisticated lime plasters and stuccos, some of which retain a brilliant white finish and structural integrity after over 1,000 years in a humid tropical climate. Their process involved a lengthy slaking and aging of the lime, sometimes incorporating plant extracts, which may have modified the crystallization process, leading to a tougher, more flexible finish. These independent innovations are not mere curiosities. They form a vital comparative framework. By studying them alongside Roman concrete, scientists can begin to separate universal principles of durability from solutions specific to one culture's geography. What common threads emerge? A reverence for time in the curing process, an intuitive understanding of composite materials blending different substance classes, and a willingness to use local, often organic, materials to modify and improve inorganic binders. This global detective work reveals a profound pattern. Multiple ancient societies, through patient observation and experimentation, discovered pathways to building for the ages. They did not have our centralized chemical industry, so they looked to their immediate environment, to volcanoes, rice paddies, and local plants, and engineered solutions from what they had. This stands in stark contrast to the modern industrial paradigm, which prizes standardization, speed, and the purity of synthesized materials. In our pursuit of a one-size-fits-all global cement, we may have overlooked a richer, more adaptable philosophy of construction. The Roman case is the most prominent and well-studied chapter, but it is part of a much wider tapestry of forgotten material wisdom. Each of these ancient recipes is a unique dialect in a universal language of resilience, a language we are only now relearning to hear. This quest for lost knowledge soon raises questions of stewardship and respect. As our tools grow powerful enough to decode the molecular diary of a 2,000-year-old harbor block, we gain not just a recipe, but a profound responsibility. The very structures that taught us the secret are themselves fragile relics of time. This creates an ethical dilemma as complex as the concrete's own chemistry. Should we use our rediscovered understanding to actively repair the Pantheon's dome with a historically accurate mortar, sealing micro cracks before they become threats? Or does introducing any new material, no matter how faithful, constitute an unacceptable alteration of the authentic, ancient fabric? Conservation philosophy often grapples with this tension between preservation and intervention. Some argue that letting a monument age naturally, even to the point of loss, is the truest form of respect for its history. Others believe our duty is to use every tool, including revived ancient ones, to ensure these wonders survive for future generations to study and admire. It is a debate about where history ends and our custody begins. The dilemma deepens when we consider commercial application. If a company successfully patents and sells a modern concrete based squarely on principles reverse engineered from Roman harbors, who, if anyone, deserves credit beyond the laboratory scientists? Is there a form of moral attribution owed to the cultural descendants of the Roman engineers, or to Italy as the steward of this heritage? Our modern world operates on systems of intellectual property, where ideas are owned and monetized. But the knowledge embedded in the Portus Causanus breakwater belongs to no one and to everyone, a gift from the past that slipped into the public domain of history for over a millennium. This forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about how we value and commodify ancient innovation. Does commercializing a lost technology honor its creators, or does it risk appropriating a collective human heritage for private gain? The pursuit is not merely scientific, it exists at the intersection of archaeology, ethics, and global commerce. It asks us to define what we owe to the past when we borrow its brilliance for our future. The silent concrete does not answer these questions, but it compels us to ask them with greater care, reminding us that the most enduring legacies are those handled with both ingenuity and profound respect. So what would this translated recipe look like in a modern mixing truck? Based on the clues we have gathered, a new material language begins to take shape, one that speaks in the ancient dialect of resilience but with a contemporary vocabulary. The binder, the glue that holds everything together, would likely be a hybrid. A smaller portion of traditional Portland cement or lime would provide the crucial early strength, allowing the structure to be built on our modern schedules. But the bulk of the binding power, perhaps 40 to 70%, would come from a modern pozzolana. This could be fly ash, the fine powder from coal plants, or metakaolin, a processed clay. These are not volcanic, but they share that essential reactive chemistry, the ability to come alive in the presence of lime and water to form a dense, durable gel over the long term. This blend immediately cuts the carbon footprint while setting the stage for centuries of strength gain. The next ingredient would be the most deliberate echo of the past. Engineers would not leave lime clasts to chance. They would deliberately engineer them, creating synthetic, marble-sized inclusions of highly reactive calcium oxide or other minerals, and distribute them evenly throughout the mix. These are the dormant healing agents, the strategic imperfections waiting for their moment. The aggregate, the rock and sand that gives concrete its body, would be selected with a new purpose. Instead of a simple, uniform gravel, the gradation would be carefully controlled, a precise mix of large stones, smaller pebbles, and coarse sand. This creates an optimal packing density, minimizing voids, but also intentionally crafting that network of microscopic pores and pathways. This porosity is not a flaw, it is the circulatory system allowing environmental fluids to seep in slowly, reach the reactive inclusions, and transport the healing minerals to where they are needed. The most radical shift, however, would come after the pour. Modern concrete is often wrapped and sealed, protected from the environment as it cures. This new material would have a different instruction manual. Its curing process would be designed to encourage a careful, managed exposure. For a marine structure, this might mean allowing controlled seawater infiltration early on. For a terrestrial application, it could involve a prolonged moist cure or even the application of mineral-rich solutions. The goal is to trigger that beneficial chemical conversation from the very beginning, to turn the environment from a besieging enemy into a collaborative partner in the material's maturation. This hypothetical formula represents a complete philosophical reversal. We are not building a fortress, we are cultivating a stone. The final product would not be a static, finished object, but the beginning of a long, slow process of becoming. It is a translation, not a copy, using 21st century chemistry and global supply chains to fulfill a 2,000-year-old promise of endurance. The quiet strength of those ancient stones holds up a mirror to our own world. We have spent this journey hunting for a lost chemical formula, but the deeper discovery is a question about time itself. Our civilization is built on speed, on materials designed for immediate function and planned obsolescence. We build for the mortgage, for the decade, for the economic quarter. The Roman vision operated on a different clock entirely, one measured in centuries and in the slow, patient dialogue between a material and its environment. Their concrete challenges our most basic assumptions, not by being mystically superior in every way, but by embodying a philosophy we have largely forgotten, one of strategic patience and resilient adaptation. The magic we sought was never a single mythical ingredient locked in an emperor's vault. It was always a synergistic system, a brilliant convergence of reactive geology, intentional imperfection, and environmental partnership. It was the volcanic ash awakening in the presence of lime, the cleverly placed lime clasts waiting to heal, the seawater that did not erode but repaired, and above all, the long-term design thinking that wove these elements together. This is the profound lesson being etched into modern laboratories. We may never pour an exact replica of a Roman harbor, nor should we, for our world has different needs and tools. But the principles we are reverse engineering are already seeding a revolution. They are pushing material science toward concretes that use industrial byproducts as modern pozzolans, that sequester carbon instead of emitting it, and that are engineered from the atom up to self-diagnose and repair their own microfractures. The lost formula, therefore, is not a relic to be copied. It is a compass being rediscovered piece by atomic piece, guiding us toward a more sustainable and resilient way of building. It urges us to construct a future that thinks in generations, that sees durability not as a cost but as a legacy. The silent harbors of the past are no longer just ruins, they are mentors whispering a timeless truth, that the most enduring things are built not just with strength but with wisdom.